Welcome to Driven, the Unscripted Success podcast, with your hosts, Mike Menino and Nareman Hamden, bringing you insights and stories on achieving personal, professional, and financial success.
Hi, everybody. This is Michael Menino, and welcome to Driven Unscripted Success podcast. Today on the podcast, we're interviewing professionals who share their experience and tips with you and how they got to where they're at today, and zooming from the beautiful island of, where are you at from, Jim?
Naples, Florida.
Naples, Florida.
Yeah.
Awesome. Jim Cloonan. He's capital investments with Lund Capital.
Lund
Capital. I'm sorry. And you basically do me a favor. Tell everybody what you do and what you're doing today.
We do a little bit of everything. So I do everything from, manage the family office to the businesses owned by the Lund Capital Group, which is Tom Lund. And so I work directly with Tom. Him and I are, kind of in sync with each other. So we do a little bit of everything. We have operating businesses. We got 6.5 million square feet of commercial real estate under management. Tom and his group, we run about $250 million for the King of Saudi. We own hotels. Some of the operating businesses we have is a fairly large laboratory out of Tampa. We're in about 15 states with that. I'm currently the president of that, as well as the executive VP of the family office / equity group. And so it's different day to day. Every day differs. I could be running a laboratory one day to dealing with the hotel the next, working on a development project that we're working on in Cape Coral of a 307 unit apartment complex. So you name it. I'm all over the place.
Well, that's awesome. Sounds like you got an exciting life ahead of you.
Yeah, it keeps you busy and keeps me on my toes. So I came from a HVAC, plumbing, electrical background, and kind of managing those type of companies, and ended up moving over to this world about 5 years ago, and kind of a interesting shift on how I got there. And it's been the best thing that ever happened to me, meeting Tom, and it's been great.
Awesome. So do you miss the HVAC?
No.
I think you would.
It's an interesting world of, managing. I worked with quite a large mechanical group out of Fort Myers, and it was, I learned a lot in business. I did plumbing, HVAC, electric for about 22 years. And after that, I'd like to say, as Tom's taught me more about business in the 5 years I've worked with him than I thought I ever could learn in 20 plus years of doing it, on my own. So I've learned an immense amount of knowledge from him. He's an amazing guy and mentor.
Awesome. He sounds great. And I love mentorship. I love help, being mentored and mentoring other people. That's what I love the most. It really does, it passes on to the next generation.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And we focus on that, and even, in all the companies that Tom and I deal with, we put, a lot of pride in making sure that we, support and grow the people that are in the company. And any company that we take over, we kind of have a outlook on restructure without firing, move people around, put them where we think they can fit, help them grow in certain areas, because a lot of times when you take over a company, they're broken because of people are in the wrong areas. The marketing isn't working. The operations are poor. The, upper management is abusive to staff. There's all sorts of things that go wrong in wide business. We like broken businesses. As Tom says,
broken businesses.
As Tom says, we like pounding round pegs into square holes. So and one day we'll figure out how to just do round pegs into round holes, but I think we get bored.
I don't know, man. I like the round peg, round hole thing. I've been a builder for 38 years, and now we're in multifamily, and that you understand better than anybody the construction trade is. You're dealing with very tough individuals all the way around.
Yeah, so I would say that's what taught me to deal with people, was working in the blue collar workforce. I grew up from 18 years old. I was running ductwork and installing air conditioners from 18 years old on, and then moved into management, and then eventually did quite a few things. I've had not a lot of jobs, but an interesting set of jobs. So
that's awesome. I like where you're at now. Managing, that's the kind of stuff I like to do, is stomping out fires all day.
Yeah. And we have, we build build a team smarter than me, and, it makes my day easier, than every company we have. So
Building a team smarter than you. That's a great, actually going to name the podcast. It's a great concept, because when you do that, it pulls you out of the process. You can go
it
do
makes me
other
look like a
systems and
genius,
process. Makes you look like a genius in the
Yeah.
process too.
So, trust me, when I was talking to some friends from back in the day about getting into a laboratory and taking over a high complexity clinical lab that's in multiple states, doing, stuff I couldn't pronounce, spell, or even think about doing, then, so I got a lot of good looks from family and friends over the last 2 years, as we've since restructured and been working through the laboratory space. And I've become quite well versed in laboratories at this point.
That's pretty cool. You get to learn something new every day.
Yeah, no, that was probably one of the hardest businesses to learn, but I get my hands dirty with everything I do. So I went out in the field and I sold it, and I spent about 100 plus days in a hotel room the first year I took it over, and, just work with the sales team. And the last, 8 to 12 months, I've spent it in the lab, learning how the lab works, so I like to get my hands dirty and learn it from the ground up. It's the only way you can properly restructure it and, actually grow it to where we want to grow it.
I heard a Navy SEAL said it best. How do you learn something? He goes, immersion. He
Yeah,
goes, you want to learn Spanish? Go, jump out of an airplane and land in Mexico. That's how
that's right. Yeah. Yeah. And the best way to, yeah, exactly. Immerse yourself in anything, and you're going to learn it, 10 times faster, and you don't forget it either. I learn best by being punched in the face. So, it's the only way I function in life.
I'm a martial artist and a professional brick breaker, and I like to say it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
You learn to get calm after green belt, and everybody goes, "Why do you get calm after green belt?" He goes, "Well, you're going to go fight a red belt at green belt, and then they're going to clean your clock, and then you learn that when you get upset, you never win. Whenever you get your emotions involved, so take a punch and stay calm after that, and that's when things start to get a lot easier."
Yeah, I did Hapkido for many years, and I got up to a brown belt and got out of that, and it was moved around a bunch, so I couldn't stick with it when I was a kid. But that was a big part of it, was staying calm.
It helps you in life, doesn't it? I mean,
does.
you're basically describing one of the first things you learn in green belt is, hey, you're going to learn at white belt how to take a punch.
That's right.
You have to learn in green belt how not to get mad when you take a punch.
That's right. Yeah, I learned. I used to always say that when I was a white belt, all the way through my yellow belt, I learned how to breathe out every time I got kicked in the stomach. So take a deep breath and exhale. So it's interesting. I feel today's generation suffers because there's no adversity. Adversity sharpens the blade. Getting in a fight, getting into the things we used to do as kids that nobody does anymore. Even my kids. I have 4 kids, and it's
4 boys and girls. What do you got?
I got a 25, a 21, girl, boy, and then a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old.
Oh, that's awesome, dude.
Yeah,
that is absolutely awesome. Yeah, that's the one mistake I made. I hit a boy and a girl, and I said I don't want to ask for any more trouble, and I wish I would have had a couple more.
Yeah, no, they're a blessing, and I'm thrilled.
They are.
And I got a fabulous wife, and you can't be successful without your team. Like I said, in business, if I don't build a smarter team than me, well, I married a woman smarter than me. So that's
one of the keys. A lot of people don't understand. They say, what's the number one indicator of success? I go, believe it or not, it's your first partner pick, and that's your wife.
That's right.
Or your husband.
Yeah, Tom's been married for 58, 59 years now. So same wife, amazing people. And, I'd say he's made me a better businessman and a better husband just by knowing him. So it's been good.
It sounds like somebody I want to meet. Maybe I can interview him too.
Yeah, he's an amazing guy. Put aside some time for it. I
would absolutely love to. I get energy from people like that.
Yeah, his story is amazing. So very, very, very successful and self-made. And we call him the grandfather of cookies. He started database marketing and mining, and he's the one who kind of created the original algorithms for data mining. And he originally did it for insurance companies, and then moved it into kind of a marketing thing. Then ended up selling his company off in the 90s, and did well. So it kind of created his company created the first algorithms that kind of predicted human behavior based on past, purchases.
In the 90s?
Yeah, like late 90s, he sold the company, I believe it was.
Wow. Yeah,
So
this is somebody I
before,
got to meet. I'd love
yeah,
to have him on
before,
I'd love to have him on the cast.
yeah, before everybody, I mean, it would have been tough competing with the Googles and Microsofts of the world, but and the Apples. But he got out before them. So, and then the big three came in and crushed everyone. So they they did it faster.
Timing.
So
Timing. That's the key.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. If we only had a watch for that, right?
I'd agree with that.
We'd all be
1,000%.
billionaires.
Yeah, exactly.
So
If someone listened to the podcast, I just looked and I was on a podcast and he joked at the end of a 2-hour podcast. He said, I wonder if I hit record. I just looked at double check. Like, it just dropped my heart.
that's good.
Yeah. Was it intentional? If someone listening to the podcast wanted to get better at what you do, what would you say? What would you suggest? What were the tips and tricks you give them?
Better at what I do, or just better? Yeah, better in business.
Better at what you do.
Yeah. Find someone smarter than you and shut up and listen.
Really?
Yeah. I just, I learn more from my team. I learn more from Tom. I learn, like even my wife. I mean, my wife and I have, a very interesting relationship. When something bothers us, we almost immediately say it, which to some people outside looking in, they're like, wow, that was brash, or that was blunt, on either side. It could be her, it could be me, but it's, shut up and listen to someone more successful than you. Let them tell their story. Tom's told me his story and it's inspirational. And, I've told my story to people. It's inspirational to them, hopefully. And but yeah, I think, people, they love to try and show you how smart they are instead of just waiting and saying that. And I've learned I'm not the smartest guy in the room. So, and I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room because you don't learn anything,
I tell everybody I want to be the dumbest guy in the room and they look at me funny.
Right.
Most people don't understand what I'm trying to say.
That's exactly how I feel about it too. And I've gone to conferences and I talk to people and I end up talking to more people than most of the people that are there trying to talk to people. And I do it on accident, so just because I want to hear what they have to say. And, and I don't do social media. LinkedIn's all I have. I have no Facebook, no Instagram, nothing. We have nothing. My wife and I have nothing. And we just, it's the same thing I always say on my birthday, it's, I didn't see you on Facebook. It's like, you could call, you could talk to
right.
So
here's an idea.
So we like talking to people, my wife and I we go out on the boat, we talk to people, we chit chat. We don't do it via social media or, it's you learn more by just talking to people. And
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's so lacking in the new generation. I notice that all the stats come up that, anxiety is going higher because a lot of people just don't have a simple conversation, and when you relate over text, someone said the written word, I don't want to quote this. Someone said the written word, you lose 90% of a conversation by the written word. You don't learn tone, inflection, and speech patterns and distress. You can't learn that from, and that's the kind of stuff me and because that's all I've ever done. I love talking to people. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I don't, I'd prefer to have a conversation, I prefer to pick up the phone and talk. And, and at the same time, it's just, it also goes back to, the things you try and say in a letter or a text, it's like, if you'd have given me more time, I'd have written you a shorter letter, but it's been more concise. And that's a saying Tom and I use on a regular basis because, I can build a business plan that's 40 pages long. And if I actually put some time into it, it could be 20 pages long, it's just, people, there's no thought going into a lot of things nowadays. And, we try and impress that on our kids a lot where it's not, we want, discussions.
Clear and concise language.
Yes. Sit at the dinner table and talk. Sit at, have, my wife and I, my younger kids go to bed quite early. My wife and I sit up on the couch at night and talk. I mean, the other night we were chit chatting until 2 a.m. about anything. And we didn't even know it was 2 a.m, and we've been together for almost 15 years. And it's, it's wild, it's people don't do it anymore.
Well, it's works.
Yeah,
it works. I remember one of my friends' dad told me a long time ago, and he was married forever too. He married till the day they died. And he said, I was getting married. and he was at the church, and he said, "Do you know what the secret of marriage is?" I said, "No, what?" He goes, "Communication."
That's right. And it's not a joke. It's
No,
people, I see it every day, and people that we know and meet that, they lose touch with their significant other. But it doesn't just translate into the marriage. Even people that when I hire on for a lot of the business that I do, it's very important to me that, the men are good fathers and the women are good wives. It makes the big difference and also tells you their support system. My wife doesn't want me to travel all the time, but she supports me and she doesn't make me feel bad about it. So that when I, come home from taking the red eye home on a Friday night,
yeah,
I get home
yeah.
before Saturday, I don't get any grief. It's what we do for, and it's all about support. And Tom did the same thing, as he was growing his business. He was all over the world traveling and talking, and, his wife supported him, and his wife's amazing too. And they're so but without that support system, you can't be successful. I don't care what anyone says. You will never be at your peak of success unless you have the team behind you. So,
And the family is another part of your team. And
that's
I
right.
like what you said. When you partner up with people, you partner with people that have good home lives, because that I never even thought about that. That's probably one of the biggest indicators that you'd want to know when you're dealing with new partners.
Yeah. Well, in the mechanical world, the one of the biggest things that we would prep for is when one of the technicians or one of the installers would go through a divorce.
Wow.
Because when they did, everything falls apart. Because men don't think. We're very simple creatures. People don't realize how simple we really are. It's, if I have food and someone who loves me and a place to go and feel fulfilled everything, I'm pretty happy. Like, I'm super simple. I'm a under 10 question guy to figure out what makes me happy and tick. So guys, it's one of those things that in the mechanical world, we'd have like whole support systems for these guys, because they'd lose their job. They just, everything falls apart. So we try and support people for that too. So not just get rid of them.
That's awesome that you support people. People work with you on breakups, because they're tough. And a lot of I agree with you. Men are simple. I agree with you 1000%. My wife was trying to look into something I was saying one time. Like, you're not getting this. I'm saying exactly what I'm trying to tell you, and that's what I mean.
Yeah,
I go, if you look into it, you're going to go a different direction.
that's
I'm
right.
telling
Yeah.
you.
The deeper you dig, the further away you get from me. So
Right.
yeah, it's
I like that one. The deeper you dig, the further you get away from me. That's brilliant. I like that.
I got a bunch of them.
Well, I'll drop them all on the podcast. We're going to enjoy them.
But yeah, no, it's a but no, it's everything you do though. I couldn't be successful. And the one thing that Tom helped me realize is that I was way undervalued prior to this. Like, I thought, I'm just a blue collar guy running a team of people, and maybe that's all I'm good at. And the other thing I would tell people out there is stop putting yourself in a box. I used to think as well, if I lose this job or leave this job, I got to go to another air conditioning company, another electrical company, or a mechanical company. That's so far from the truth. Nobody thinks outside the box. You gotta, you think I would 5 years ago when I met Tom, because his wine room broke, that's how I met him, and it's 2 months after that, he offered me a job, and it was a job that was life changing. So, and then since we've climbed mountains together, and
That's awesome.
we conquer a lot of things together. But again, it's communication and talking. Him and I talk pretty much on a daily basis, and and it could be about anything. It could be about our kids. It could be about our wives. It could be about business. It could be about managers. It could be about CEOs to other companies he has. It could be anything. It just, nothing matters, where it's an open book with him. And it's talking a lot.
Have you ever read the book The Go-Giver?
No.
Oh, it's a great book. And the main character is Pindar.
What is it called?
The Go-Giver. I think you'll see Tom in The Go-Giver's Pindar. Pindar is a very rich man, and he helps out this guy in business. And how we got to meet him was through a friend of his, and then he just went over to ask for help, and the guy changed his life. It sounds like your story. I'm dead serious.
So my wife and I have always said, if we had a boat big enough we could name one day, we always call it Just Say Yes, because her and I have always had a saying between us is you just say yes to opportunity as long as it doesn't,
Yes.
and you don't get murdered and you don't end up in jail. So just say yes to opportunity, because you never know what it's going to do. Like, so I was driving home from work at, I think it was 5:30, and it was November of 2020, whatever COVID was, right? 2020.
2020.
Right. Yeah. Right around there. So November of 2020, I was driving home from work and I get a call from a number I didn't know who it was. And it was Tom, and I'm driving home, bad day at work, typical end of the day in summer, or like fall area season starting down in Naples in fall. And, so hi, this is Tom. I just wanted to see if you can swing by the house. And, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I am not fixing, I'm not, call the service company. I'm immediately not annoyed, but immediately like, why is a customer calling my phone at 5? I just want to go home, because that's how my days would end. I just wanted to go home. And I'm driving home, and I said, well, let me call my wife and see what we have going on, make sure I'm not breaking any plans with my wife. Well, my wife was out of town, so there was no plans to make. I'm going home to an empty house by myself, and I'm thinking of ways to say no. And I called my wife just to say, I got this call, strange, from Tom, and he said to come over, and he just wants to chit chat, and she's like, well, just go. What's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to have probably a better glass of wine than you've ever had, and you enjoy some conversation, then go home later. You have nothing to do. And I said, all right. I called him back, and we talked for, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours that day. It's like into 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And I just left after that. And the next day made a job offer to me. So if I would have said no and went home, it would have been off the table, and I'd still be in the HVAC business, slaving away behind a desk with, herding cats.
Herding cats.
Yeah. So,
well, you're in a much better position. I highly suggest you read that book and tell me if the main character is your Tom. It's a great book. It's called The Go-Giver. So what is one of the biggest challenges you had to overcome over your career? I'm sure you have I'm sure he put you in a position where there's more challenges.
There's more challenges now than I've ever, I would say, the laboratory is a very tough business. It's not an easy business. Anything that bills the government's a tough business anyways. But the, I'd say challenges to overcome are, it's the typical challenges everyone has in every company. Hiring people, terrible. Finding the right person, terrible. It's hard.
Hiring someone smarter than you.
Yeah, so I started getting real good at writing. Coming up with the creative team that really just finds or writes ads. I kind of write most of them to find the right people to come into the business. So it's surrounding myself with the right people. Because I have a trust issue with most people. So the I keep my circle small. So I'd say that's probably the hardest part, is me getting outside of my my own
comfort zone.
Yeah, I can almost I can pigeonhole myself into not doing something because I'm worried about people, trust, or something going wrong, and kind of overthinking that. But so yeah, I say people probably the hardest part. I've had tons of adversity in my life, but the current challenges in today's market is people, finding the right people.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you on that. I've been very, very blessed over the years to have the right people. It seems like, well, as a builder, I have to hire contractors on a daily basis. Yeah. And I've been very good over the, is it my experience that if I talk to somebody for 15 minutes, I know this is not the guy I want to work with? Or is it a feeling? Do you know what I'm trying to illustrate? Yeah. Is it the experience or a feeling that you don't want to work with this person, or you really do want to work with this person?
Yeah.
And within a few minutes, I can delegate who I want to work with, and it works out. It seems to work out fantastic.
Yeah. If I handle the hiring process, I have one interview. It's the first interview. And if there's no second interview, I'm not giving you a job. And if there's no second interview, you might have gotten a job. I hire on the first interview.
Oh, that's good. Well, then you got pretty much the same experience. You got is it the expertise or is it the feeling? What is the, what do you think it is?
I think it's, and the beauty of the construction industry is you don't meet one person, you meet hundreds of people in a week,
right.
In the service industry, I've had terrible customers. I've had, customers that I never want to talk to again, and customers that I could see being friends with forever, and I could see employees that same thing, So, I mean, I've probably hired and fired, over 1,000 people in my career at this point. It was a big mechanical company and all the things we do. So it's experience, yeah, but it's still a feeling about that personalities. I'm pretty good.
Right, it's both. So you're saying it's both, and I agree with you 1,000%.
I had some really great, when I was 30, I was going through a divorce and I was terribly angry about a lot of things. And I lost a job that I had that I thought was my end all, and it wasn't. I had helped, build a company, and it's supposed to be my, part me, and it didn't work out, and it's mad at the world, right? So I met Lee Knapp, and she was also she kind of a business coach, and they, for whatever reason, they said, we should have Jim be a supervisor in the company. So I met Lee Knapp. She started up the Avon sales team way back when Avon started up, and she started it, I believe, over Australia or something like that. I can't remember what she said. Now I'm sad that I can't remember what she told me where she started it, but she started the Avon sales team, and she started working with me on, I don't know why, I'm a very high D personality on the disc test, so I'm like literally on the outside ring, and I can be pretty difficult to work with. And at that time I was like way off the chart. I couldn't figure out how to deal with people. I was so angry at everything. I'd lose my temper. I was never going to be successful. And she was the first person in my life that told me, just shut up. I was like, well, what do you mean shut up? You can't tell me to shut up. And she's like, just shut up. And she was that blunt about it. And nicest woman in the world. But she and I started listening. As I tell you, listening is the most important thing you can do. And I started listening. She started teaching me about personalities, what she called replacement word therapy, is because I would use the wrong word. I'd be like, well, this guy's an idiot. And she goes, that's probably not the nicest thing to say. Maybe we can think of something different.
Even though it's true.
Yeah, she started teaching me, and I was in the mechanical trade. I mean, it's a knuckle dragger trade. That's what we are. We're all knuckle draggers. We're all walking around dragging our knuckles, ready to break something, and then they're trying to polish this young guy that's 30 years old, going through bankruptcy, foreclosure, divorce. I mean, you name it. I'm pretty much no house, no anything. And she wants to soften me up, which I always thought was kind of funny. And she just wanted a project. And but she was great. She's an amazing woman. And I still to this day talk to her. And it's been 15 years since I met her. And and she's just an amazing woman. She's, she knows my family. She knows Tom. It's those certain people that I started, and she was the one who and that's why I started listening to people, and I started realizing that, I didn't know anything, I was the dumbest guy in the room. So, you have to accept it.
I love that saying. Well, yeah. I love that saying. I love the dumbest guy in the room. And people really, you understand it, but most people are like, what, why do they keep saying that, surround yourself with the 5 most successful people? I'm like, well, I would be the dumbest guy in the room, right?
Right.
And they're like, the light bulb comes on. Oh, that's what you've been saying forever. I'm like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like when everyone asks me, it's like, well, how'd you get into what you were doing? I said, I'm just lucky. And my wife hates when I say that. She goes,
well, you're blessed. You're blessed.
Yeah, I'm blessed, and I stepped in the right way. And that's the other thing, is that people moved away from religion, as I did when I was younger too. And then I've come back to it, and I've, and I believe, there's those things in your head that you got to start listening to. And it's not me talking, it's somebody else telling me, if you can't listen to God speaking to you, and I started just recently really focusing on that, and I'm on another path, so now I'm on another path of trying to be energized and growing certain businesses that we have. And it's kind of listening to good word, so I say God speaks to you many ways, right? And apparently he likes to speak to me, and, maybe you shouldn't go this route. And then when I ignore it, then I, hit an oyster bed with my boat, so, stuff like that, stuff like that happens. Maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't do this. Maybe you should do this. And I know I'm telling myself this, but I'm not listening. And again, it goes back to just shut up and listen. So but I'm a Southside Chicago knuckle dragging, mechanical guy that got into a very polished business world. And there's a lot of degrees and a lot of smart people out there, and if you could just, and I don't listen to all of them because I don't like talking. but there's a lot of people I've met, since doing this that's been their story. Just listen to their story. They've done a lot more wrong than I have. So why not listen to what they did wrong and just don't do that? It sounds so
Make
simple.
it sound so simple. Your mind sounds so simple, Jim. Come on, just do, don't do that.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I've got a little story on that too. Like, and I listen to a lot of people and I learn from them. And that, I think that's the best way to learn. This one guy said to my dad one time, one friend of mine said, "Hey, Tom, what's the best advice you can give somebody?" And my dad stopped and thought and goes, "A wise man profits from another man's mistakes." And I go, "Oh, that's pretty good."
That's right.
And he literally, right. And it's basically what we're saying.
Yeah.
He goes, "Yeah, I'm the kind of guy that got to make all the mistakes myself. I just can't listen to him." I told him, "Dude, you got a rough life ahead of you.
That's
You
right.
got a rough
You know
life
what?
ahead of you."
Up until 30 years old, I made every mistake on my own because I was smarter than everyone else. And that's what I did. I did a lot of really dumb things, and it was, and I did fine. I was successful in my own mind. I had, but people don't realize the levels of success that if you just open yourself up to listening to what other people have to say and listening to their story and figure, what, Tom's given me an entire roadmap on how to be successful. And we do it just by chit-chatting and talking. Tom and we sat at his house I can go to his house at noon and leave his house at 1 a.m. because we just stay up talking, hanging out, and we talk about everything, and that's in business. I mean, we've restructured entire businesses sitting at his kitchen table, going over things, and but nobody listens anymore, and I want my kids to listen, and it's what I teach them. I teach them is, open your ears, shut your mouth, it's what you have to do.
I would love to be at that dinner table. That guy sounds like, I need you to read that book. I don't recommend books. I don't recommend books to anybody, but it sounds like the Pindar is Tom.
Yeah, no, I'm going to read it. But no, it's and that's the thing too, is give credit where credit is due too. I mean, that's people. I don't take, I Tom has another saying that I really like: take blame for it, because then you can fix it. It's like, the one thing, just take blame for it. It's, what, this is my fault. My fault. Now we can move past it, right? I did it. No big deal. Yep, I'm wrong. You're right. Fine. No big deal. You're not in trouble. Let's fix it, because you can't not fix anything, if everyone's trying to figure out who did this, who did that, point fingers every way. So
I try and teach that so often. It's insane. And, someone calls me up and says, "Hey, what do you think about this?" I love to give, coaching, and only when it's asked for. And I go, "Well, this is your fault. And here's the joy of it's your fault. You can fix it. If it's somebody else's fault, you can't fix it.
That's right.
So take ownership of it, then you can fix it."
Yeah.
That's the real joy in it. Just like you're saying.
People don't realize how freeing it is just to get that hurdle. It's the same thing. It's it's apologizing to your wife, because I could be very blunt, especially if I'm kind of, and I spool sometimes, like if I'm like, we're restructuring and growing this lab. So I get a little crazy in my head. I come home and I kind of like verbally dump all of my whole day on her, and we have a thing where she'll ask me, where if it's a bad day, she always asks, she'll say, "Do you want my advice or do you want me to just listen?" And that's what she asked me, which is the best thing that you could possibly do to a guy that is spooling a little bit, because I don't need advice all the time. I need to just get it off my plate. Right. And my wife is great at letting me get it off my plate. And then, and half the time I'm talking about things she doesn't understand, doesn't care to understand, probably really boring to her, to be honest with you. And, so, and because working with Tom, we do everything from estate planning to development to hotels to, the laboratory to capital company. We got the real estate company. We got all sorts of stuff, so and I can change subjects 12 times in one topic, one sit down with my wife. So how do you even plan? How the hell do you keep up with that? You never do it. It's impossible,
No, I know exactly what you mean. I get it. Yeah. Me and you're on this, pretty much on the same page on a lot of things. Sounds like things are going pretty well for you in your businesses. Looking forward to the future, here's the big question. Wondering how you doing a great job making money. How do you create passive income in your businesses and invest?
So I'm not a big investor. I don't like the stock market. I don't like, I'm not a fan of, I don't care what they are. I'm not a fan of ETFs. I'm not a fan. I have the typical, I'm afraid of the world ending investments like gold and silver and stuff like that. And and I have cryptocurrency because I bought it, 8 or 9 years ago for 100.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I bought it, and I'd never, I had to actually find it, and I didn't even know I had it still. And, and I've always said I didn't have to sell it then. Why sell it now? So I've just held on to it, and I just don't even look at it. I just don't care about stuff like that. You know, Passive income, I think creating passive income is probably, Tom and I have the same belief is I'd prefer to do operating businesses that have, a replicatable product or, it depends on what type of business we want to get into. Like the laboratory, we have a lot, a little product that we sell to a lot of people, or you find one big product to sell to a little people, a little bit of people. So but I need something replicatable throughout the country that can kick off, set amount of revenue, whatever you plan on doing for whatever percentage of brain damage we think it's worth. If I think a business is worth 10% brain damage, I only have 100%, and I live life by percentages. My whole life is a percentage. I think I'm going to live to 100. So, and I only say that because it makes it easy math, so today was a bad, this year was a bad year, call it. Well, that's only 1% of my life. So I'm not too worried about it.
There you go.
So
that's a great outlook.
Yeah, so we don't stress about stuff like that. We clean out the closet one year and then the next year we go ahead and reorganize it, and sometimes but it's a very small percentage, raising your kids. It's, me, I started over. So it's about 36% of my 40% of my life, so
the kids are such blessings though. It's so worth it.
Oh, it's amazing.
I like what you did. You hit a set first, then a set second.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one regret I've talked about multiple times on the podcast. I got 2 great kids. I should have had more, but my son just told me a couple months ago that he's going to make me a grandpa.
Oh, well, there you go. So you're going to get plenty more kids in your life. Yeah. No,
I can't wait.
Yeah, I had, when I went through a divorce, it was a trying time. It was, something, and my older kids they're great kids, and and then, after that experience, I was dead set. I'm never having kids again, and get kind of in that mindset, kind of negative, pretty angry about everything. And like I was telling you, but then I, met my wife, and, it was took a while, but, she eventually, I drank the Kool-Aid and bought into it, and we did it. And it's been great. It's been a huge blessing. It's the best thing I ever did, is doing that. And, but yeah, it's been kids change your perspective on a lot of things. They give you something to work for, your why, the why.
Your why, exactly.
Yeah.
I've said that 1,000 times. You could do this podcast because everything you're saying is exactly what I do.
Yeah. So my why is my family. That's what I have right now. That's, I want to, and the only people in life I ever want to impress is my wife and my 2 kids and my 4 kids. I want to impress them. I want to impress my wife and 4 kids, and then I want to impress Tom and Carol. That's who I want to impress. Everybody else, I could work through it. We'll get there. So but I think that's success. I mean, it's not all about money for me. It's, the money comes when you listen to yourself, you listen to others, I think, believe in God, number one. I'm a spiritual God believer, so I believe in things that probably aren't in the Bible, but I believe in a lot of different stuff. But I think you got to kind of, there's some, you got to listen to yourself and listen to what's going on, the signs around you. And
I agree wholeheartedly. I got a good God story that I can tell you off camera. Yeah, I listen.
I have one of those too, and it was a pivotal moment in my life where it changed my life forever when I was about 32, and it was a near-death experience, and
really,
and that's when I learned that I needed to stop. It's not that bad, and if I'm still here, why? That's what I kept asking. It's like, why? Why am I still here? I shouldn't.
Well, do you mind sharing, or is it a little too personal?
No, it's a tough story, So my wife and I were dating, and we decided, I said, let's go down and go diving. I want to go diving. We'll take the boat down. Took the boat down, and this was, I don't know, a while in the hangar, but we get down, floating down out in the Keys, down at Islamorada, go down, tie the boat off to the buoy. Didn't, I broke all the rules, left no one on the boat, didn't check the weather,
Ooh.
didn't tell anyone where we were going.
Ooh.
I broke every rule, right? Nobody can tell me how stupid I am because I've already told you I'm the dumbest guy in the room. So nobody can say that. So I've taken that power away from everybody that listens to this. You can't call me dumb, all right? I've already done it. I already know I'm dumb. And and we're floating around, and we say, all right, let's go diving. And there's a few boats out there, and they're all tied off. And we go down, and I have a knack for, I breathe really slowly underwater, so I can stay under in shallow water for like an hour and 20 minutes, hour and 30 minutes. I can stay under for a long time. So can my wife. And
Nice.
yeah, so we get back, and it's coming up on 3 o'clock or so, and pop back up, and I told her, I said, we're gonna swim back to the boat underwater, giving her hand signals. And I said, we'll swim back to the boat, and get there, and I see the rope hanging from where my boat was tied off. We're in the middle of the ocean, or I don't know, 10 miles out or so, let's call it. And the rope's just dangling from the buoy that the boat was tied to. I'm like, oh shit. So I get up, and I'm thinking, well, there's other boats. Well, someone will be here. Get up, peek our head above. It had to be 6-foot seas at this point. Black clouds.
6 foot.
Yeah, black clouds. And I felt the current underwater picking up real bad. That's why I was like, let's get back to the boat, and we got to get back in. It's not a boat that's built to be out in this type of weather. And so we get back up to where the boat was, and peeked our head up. And so what do we do now? The boat's gone, so we come out from a dive, the boat's gone, nowhere to be seen, can't see it. The wind is blowing. I left my bimini top up. Again, another thing I shouldn't have done, created a kite and kept lifting the boat out of the water. And it eventually broke the front cleat on the boat is what happened. It broke free. It was just and it broke the cleat. And, so boat takes off, it's now, 3:30, it's 83, 84 degree water. It's not the warmest part of the year, and no wetsuits. So you're thinking, 83 sounds warm for people up north, but you still die in 83 degree water because of hypothermia. So I'm looking around, getting to the top of the waves, looking at everything. Not a single boat on the reef. Nobody. They're all gone. Weather picked up. Everyone left.
How far can you see land?
Barely. You couldn't swim it because we're out in the Atlantic, so the currents are just nasty.
Oh, you're not in the Gulf.
No, we're in the Atlantic, so it's ripping. The current. So I tied my leg to the buoy, and I tied my wife's leg to the buoy, and let it. You sit there like you're fishing, but for sharks. Apparently, it's what it looked like.
Fishing for sharks.
So we're tied to a buoy. I dropped dive gear just to keep our BC on, and we're floating there, thinking, all right, well, I guess it can't get any worse, right? Like so. But then the weather picks up. Well, it can get worse. Nobody's coming out, So now so she asked me, and I'm realizing what's going on here. And she's a bit younger than I am. She's 8 years younger than I am, and I think she's 25 at this point. And she's kind of laughed about it, like, this stinks. And I was like, this doesn't stink. I said, we're gonna die out here tonight. Like, this is it. I said, I'm sorry I did. I'm apologizing to her. I'm telling her, I'm sorry I did this to you. This is how it's, I'm trying to explain to her. And she goes, we'll be all right. I don't know why she kept saying it, pissing me off, and I was, it's like, I said, listen for boats. I have a whistle. That's all I have, a whistle, because I'm unprepared. And, so I said, you listen for boats. And I said, I'm going to look down. You look up. You look down. I look up. She's like, look down for what? I said, for sharks. I don't want to be bit by something without knowing it's coming. So just tell me what's down below me when I go up, and you just look down, and I'll look up. You look down, and we kept doing that. And now it's getting dark out, and we're freezing. I mean, absolutely freezing. It's shivering, blue lips, just kind of floating there on our backs now, not doing anything. We just figured it's the end, so it's getting dark out. And then out of nowhere, we hear a diesel engine, like a big boat coming and just chugging through the waves. And we're thinking, couldn't make it out. I start blowing that whistle like you wouldn't believe, and pushing off her to get above the waves, waving my hands. And finally they see us, they turn around, come to us, pick us up. We can't even move our legs. We can't climb the ladders. We can't, our legs are just locked up, hands are
What time was this about?
What's that?
What time was this that you got rescued?
It had to be 7 o'clock. 7:30. It was getting dark. If it got dark, we were screwed. That was the end of it. It was, dark was the end of it for us. And and this boat pulls up, and my wife and I still to this day, we don't remember their faces. We can't see their faces. I can't picture the boat. We can't picture anybody on the boat. How many people? Her recollection of the people on the boat is different than my recollection.
My recollection, yeah.
So they said, oh, you have a boat with a blacktop, like 5 miles that way.
We saw it. We saw it back there.
We saw it coming in, and it was just cruising, with the top up and big die flag on it. And they said, we'll take you back to it. So they took us back to the boat, and lectured me the whole way too. And guys, I already
deserved it. I hate to say that.
Oh, I deserved all of it.
No, like you hit a whistle. Thank God.
Yeah, no, if we didn't have that whistle, they would have never seen us because the waves were too big. So, we get there and we're cruising back in, and I'll never forget the song, and my wife won't, but that's the only thing we agree on is the song that came on the radio on the boat on the ride back in. It's a reggae song, but it's Open Your Eyes is the name of the song.
That's God talking to you.
It was the whole time. And, he sent them to pick us up, and I'm pretty sure they said, I know. And I tell my wife and I tell everybody this, and I said, I'm collateral saving because God was like, she can't die. We need her to stick around for a little.
Right.
Son of a, why do we?
Yeah.
Can a shark eat him? And then we just get her, and I thought that's what would have happened.
That'd be a traumatic experience for her.
Right.
So
he didn't want to hurt her
alive. Right.
So, but yeah, that was it. And so I sold all my dive gear in the boat when I got home. And I focused on work,
my friend.
It really did. I got a job after that because I had lost my job going through the course after that. And I was just, and I started over as changing filters as a maintenance guy, and
nice.
Just, that's what I did. $20 an hour, just went out there and hustled and just moved up from there.
Nice. Well, you got some crazy stories. That is absolutely phenomenal. I can't thank you enough for that one. That's life-changing.
It was, for me, it was, it's my wife just recently kind of that story set in for her. And, I always like to say it's because it wasn't your lesson to learn. It's always affected me because it was my lesson to learn. That wasn't your lesson. My lesson was, open your eyes and start listening to people, start listening to what's going on around you, and just figure this out. Don't be so stupid. And that's why, because it never really bothered me. I don't think the gravity of the situation ever really settled in for her, and she just kind of blocked it out. And but I always say it's because it wasn't her lesson, it was my lesson to learn. So, and it works.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Hey, listen, now that we're ramping up, really appreciate your time out here. I have one question that usually a lot of people have a pause on. I want to make sure this is a good pause. So if you could go back and knowing everything you know now to your 20s, what would you do different? And what would you do the same?
What would I do different? There's a ton of things I would do different. I had a rocky life, my entire life, from childhood on. So I think, what I would do the same is I wouldn't change my childhood, even though it sucked. It was terrible.
Really?
I wouldn't change it, because it kind of created, as Tom says, adversity sharpens the blade. I went left instead of right. I didn't go to jail. I didn't get in trouble. I didn't do drugs. I didn't, so I wouldn't change that, no matter how hard it was, and the things that's what I wouldn't change. Things I would change was probably some of the paths I took, like we talked about earlier is, I learned everything the hard way, because someone would say, yeah, you shouldn't go that way. I was always at like fork in the river, dark clouds and lightning over here, and then bright skies and a rainbow over here. And I'm like, that way looks shorter. So that I would probably change some of the paths that I took, and in business, what I would change, like if I, going through business, I'd get more stuff in writing.
Okay, good. That's a gold bomb here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, because
get more stuff in writing.
Yeah, that screwed me over more than once, was promises and then handshakes on certain people. And, and I didn't realize that asking somebody to get something in writing isn't offensive. It's good.
No.
So
no, we do multifamily, and it's all contracts.
That's right. Yeah, you can talk about it, but until it's on paper, we're not doing it.
Well, so. Putting it on paper makes it real.
That's right.
Like when we do an LOI.
Yeah.
You know better than anybody. We got an LOI. Here's an LOI. The contract's made off the LOI.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
No, it's it's necessary. So that's what I would tell younger people is get it in writing. I tell my older daughter, she works in Jacksonville. She's an account rep for D&B, and she's, it's the same thing as, she calls me every once in a while for advice, which is nice when they start doing that. To ask for, advice on promotions or what she should do, or should she ask for something else, or should she go this route or that route? And we talk about the sales. Because I like sales. I'm good at sales, and I'm good at, kind of operations and sales. So I have a unique ability. Usually operations is one, sales is the other. I focus on both, and I think that's my whole career.
Nice. Works out great. Hey, Jim, I can't thank you enough for your time.
Sure. Thank
If
you.
anybody wants to get in contact with you, how would they do that?
Jim at Lund Capital is, my email address. That's about it. I mean, I don't really have LinkedIn. I got LinkedIn. I'm a ghost online, and I actually spend a lot. I spend a lot of time on making sure my name disappears off online. I make Google remove every search result with my name in it, because I don't need to be popular. I'm not the popular guy.
Well, you are the popular guy on the podcast. You're one of the best ones I've had so far. I can't thank you enough.
Yeah.
And thank you for your time. And we'll let everybody go. And if you guys want to contact Jim, you're only going to find him on LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn or email.
Lund Capital. There you go. Thanks a lot. Have a great day, everybody. And if you guys have any questions, let us know. Thanks.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to Driven, the Unscripted Success Podcast. Want to share your story? Apply to be a guest at drivensuccesspodcast.com/guest.